both of them smoking out of their tracheas and like make them into camels.
Okay, that's how we're going to start off episode 255 of the In the Tank podcast. We're going to be talking about COVID-19 as well as some China stuff, communist China stuff. Apparently, communist China is the left is a big fan of communist China, but we'll get into that in a little bit. As always, I'm your host, Donald Kendal. Joining me today, I have got editorial director Justin Haskins. What's going on, sir?
I'm doing all right. How are you?
Staying strong with that anti-whaling hat. No, pro-whaling.
Pro-whaling. Anti-whale. Pro-whaling.
Anti-whale.
Yeah.
Pro-whaling.
Yeah, anti-whale, pro-whaling. Right.
Isaac Orr, research fellow at the Center of the American Experiment. How are you, good sir?
Good. I saw an article about blue whales making a comeback in South America in the Atlantic. So sorry, Justin.
Yeah, terrible news. We got to get right on top of that.
Get on that.
Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
I'm doing good. Hello, Ricochet listeners. And, Donnie, you always get on me for when I have to substitute host for you, how poorly I open. I don't think you should point that out anymore, because then I might point out this opening.
Oh, well, I blame Isaac for that one. I mean, come on. How was I supposed to know he was going to go on a rant about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris?
I just made an observation that Joe Kamala is going to be great for like the tobacco industry. Like maybe that was the plan the whole time. Just like,
well, should we address this? I mean, we talked for like a half hour last week about how, according to Politico, Kamala Harris was going to be announced as the VP on August 1st. August 1st came and passed. Didn't announce it.
They're not even going to Milwaukee anymore.
Now that the hot money is on
on
Susan Rice.
Yeah, but in fairness, does Joe Biden know that August 1st has come and gone, or does he think August 1st is like 2 weeks from now? We don't know. We don't know, America. So in fairness to Politico, anything is possible at this point.
And have they told him who he's picking for his vice president yet? I mean, they haven't told him.
Maybe they forgot to tell him. Maybe nobody told Joe.
He's like, Joe, do you know who you're picking for VP yet? He's like, VP of what?
Yeah.
Come on, man.
It's like of America, Joe. Which America?
So, question: could he make Obama his VP pick? Like, he couldn't because he's not a woman, and he's already said he would pick a woman of color. But like, would it be like constitutionally possible for him to pick Obama, or is that? I don't know.
It is. No, I thought it was. Yeah.
He should have just done that.
Point of order: please don't use gender binary language, please. And
point of privilege.
Point of privilege. Second of all,
please do not use gendered language to address everyone.
Oh,
Andy killing it with the drops today.
The drops are just going to be the whole show.
Yeah, that's going to be the whole show. Yeah, that's a good question. I don't know. I think you can be vice president even if you can't serve as president, but I could be wrong about that. I'm not sure. That's a good question.
I don't know, but we'll see. We'll see who is. Like I said, the hot money's on Susan Rice, but I guess we'll see. Who cares? Joe Biden, he's a gaffe machine. He'll continue to entertain us throughout the rest of this campaign at the very least.
For the next 4 years.
Don't you dare say that.
For the next 4 years. That's all.
I'm just waiting.
Not 8. He's not going to live for 8. That's for
I'm
sure.
waiting patiently for the first debate. That is going to be.
They're not going to have a debate. Why would they have a debate? They're not going to have one.
I read an article that said that Trump now wants a 4th debate.
Yeah.
I bet he wants 10. If I was Trump, that's exactly right. I want to debate him every single day. How could it possibly hurt you at this point?
He should just set up like StreamYard, broadcasts and just keep sending Biden links until he could just record.
Even before it's been obvious that Joe Biden's cognitive decline that he gets very sensitive about has been increasing. I always thought that Donald Trump's biggest challenge in a debate with Joe Biden was being too hard on him. I mean, it'd be like clubbing a baby seal if he went after him the way he went after Hillary, and you would get the sympathy for Joe Biden. And I think that actually still is a possibility. But the idea of those two men on the stage together and there's going to be no audience, of course. It's just going to be, the lefty journalists on a panel, all 6 feet apart, all, maybe even wearing masks. And then these two gents, maybe 10, 15 feet apart on the stage, and there's no help. There's no, you might have notes. They'll probably give them the questions ahead of time, Joe Biden, that is, but there's no audience there to help your attitude and your focus and your energy. This is going to be, when these debates happen, they're going to be very unique, obviously, thanks to COVID. But, this is going to be Joe on his own. I mean, you look at him now, the very rare times he has walked out of his basement for something other than getting dinner upstairs. He's basically led around by the arm by his handlers. In a debate against Trump, he's completely on his own. I mean, this is, again, I still think Trump needs to be careful not to make it look like, you're clubbing a baby seal. Nobody wants to see that.
It's a good point.
Have you ever watched YouTube videos of clubbing a baby seal?
Oh my gosh.
You're okay. Isaac.
So you brought up the idea of there not being an audience, which is actually that's a huge point I never really thought about. Now the moderators of the debate are going to have to boo and hiss Trump. So that'll be a change. That'll be interesting.
True. I don't know if it'll be a change per se, but
they'll have to say out loud their internal monologue during the debate.
That's right. So I do want to get to COVID stuff, but Jim was heated over this article that he sent me. This is a Fox News article about Kindergarten Cop, and the screening was canceled in Oregon, and it was compared to Gone with the Winds. Oh my gosh. So apparently the Northwest Film Center canceled an August 6th outdoor screening of the 1990 movie Kindergarten Cop, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, after it was excoriated on Twitter for glorifying the traumatization of children by police, and compared to Birth of a Nation and Gone with the Wind. So apparently at this film festival that takes place in Oregon, they were going to open up this film festival with Kindergarten Cop, because apparently it's been 30 years since that movie came out. It was filmed and I think takes place in Oregon. And, it was just supposed to be a nice little fun way to open up the film festival. Well, Portland author Lois Levin, that outraged her. So she took to Twitter, as all social activists do nowadays, and started a tweet storm. She referenced the school to prison pipeline and claimed that police frequently arrest American children and throw them in jail. So I'm reading through this halfway through the article, and I'm just like, this is outrageous. Like, come on. Like, seriously, even Kindergarten Cop isn't shielded from all of this insanity. And then I get to the second half of this article, and I start thinking, is this satire? Am I reading a Babylon Bee article here? So the author that's complaining, that's doing this tweet storm against Kindergarten Cop, added, 5 and 6-year-olds are handcuffed and hauled off to jail routinely in this country, and this criminalization of children increases dramatically when cops are assigned to work in schools. I'm just like, I don't remember any pattern of 5 and 6-year-olds being hauled off by police officers in America, but I guess I am, not the most observant. Maybe that's happening. I'm not sure. And then she compares the movie to Gone with the Wind and Birth of a Nation, which I'm just thinking
Kindergarten Cop.
You're right. When I think about controversial movies, it goes number 1, Birth of a Nation. Number 2, Kindergarten Cop.
Yikes.
You know what's funny is I can't think of a single thing that they have in common.
Well, yeah.
What do they have in common? I literally can't think of a single thing. One set in the South, one was made in the 90s, the other was made, 60, 70 years ago, whatever. One set on a plantation, the other one's in an elementary school. Arnold Schwarzenegger, literally, what do they have in common? They could not be two more different movies.
They apparently glorify oppression.
Yeah.
See? That's the key.
Well, if you're saying that the public school system is tantamount to a slave plantation, then
Yeah, we're getting somewhere.
I guess we could. Yeah, I mean, that's a little bit closer.
Yeah,
I guess.
all right, I'm listening.
Yeah, I don't see it. The other thing that's so stupid about this is her big. I mean, there's a lot of things that are stupid about it, right? But her big complaint is that it glorifies. Her first big complaint is that it glorifies police in schools, right?
Yeah.
But has she not seen the movie? Like he's undercover,
Right.
They don't know that he's a police officer. That's the whole point. He doesn't tell them. He hides it. That's the whole point.
Well, okay, Justin, if we start off this film festival that you've never heard of, watching Kindergarten Cop, the next thing we know, every school teacher in America is going to be an undercover policeman. Are you going to live with yourself after allowing this to happen? We got to stop this now.
I think school shootings, which are already rare, would go down.
Well, that's a good point.
I mean, we have cops in schools because of Columbine, because of school shootings. It didn't used to be routine. I graduated high school in 1728, and we didn't have television. We also didn't have cops in our schools. It didn't happen until 1998 was when Columbine happened, and then it just became you had the school resource officer. You had a local cop in the school at all times.
You know what's hilarious is in that movie, and I haven't watched it in a long time, but in that movie, Arnold starts off as like a really kind of hard-nosed police officer, right?
That's true.
Yeah, it's a tough guy.
And then by dealing with this population that he's tasked with protecting, he becomes a lot more compassionate and a lot more caring and all of this stuff. So in fact, it should be like a very promoted idea, right? Like,
yeah, good point.
We should have a national dialogue about Kindergarten Cop.
That's a good point. Every hardened cop should be sent to school so that they can become more like 5 and 6 year olds. That's what we need. We need to soften our cops with the lovable, little 5 and 6 year olds. That's what we need to do. It makes sense.
Arnold's character grew as a person, but Arnold didn't grow very much as an actor in this film. I mean, actually, I've always enjoyed this film. When I come across it, I usually keep it on. I know I'm a terrible person, but his acting is actually really bad, but there's a certain charm to it. I mean, he tries to do some serious stuff and then there's comedy, but he's a bad actor, but he is nonetheless charming on screen.
I actually think this is one of his best performances.
Really?
Jamie, Alex Jingle All the Way. What's your favorite Arnold Schwarzenegger movie?
Oh, Terminator 2 is the best.
Terminator is the
best
one. You've never seen Terminator?
I've never
seen
seen
original Terminator is better.
We should get it.
No, it's not. Terminator 2 is the best. It perfects the Terminator franchise.
Well, look, before we get away from the
Twins with Danny DeVito is also
that's also pretty good. Yeah, that's true. He's actually better in that. Well, look, before we get away from the very important topic of how Kindergarten Cop has been canceled from the film festival in Oregon that nobody heard of, but we're told that cancel culture doesn't exist, right? This is apparently an author, not famous. She had 500 something followers. She puts up 7 tweets or something like that, with this convoluted explanation for why Kindergarten Cop, to show that in public to children would be akin to showing them Birth of a Nation, which glorified the Klan. I mean, this, and then of course, it's in Portland. So of course, the organizers of this film festival capitulated immediately. I guess they don't know how to look and see how many followers somebody has. Somebody with 500 followers is literally invisible until you make them visible. But, it's just another example of the madness of cancel culture. This is crazy. Kindergarten Cop is a lot of things. It is not a harmful film to show to children. It is a wholesome, fun, silly film that's been shown on television and, for 30 years now, obviously.
I think it's rated PG.
Well, yeah.
I don't even think it's PG-13. I think it's PG.
Yeah. I mean, look, it's yet another checkbox for cancel culture that actually does happen in this country, and it's a good example because you can't get something more silly than getting upset that the public may be seeing Kindergarten Cop. But we did have a little bit of a victory on cancel culture this week with Trader Joe's. If you remember, they talked about how they had come out and said, you know what, some of our customers are upset that we sell our Mexican food under the tongue-in-cheek label of Trader Jose's. And our Chinese food is labeled Trader Ming's. And people that can't stand anybody having any fun decided, they pressured Trader Joe's to end that insensitive labeling of their food. But after a couple of days after capitulating, after a couple of days, Trader Joe's said, yeah, you know what? Forget it. We're not going to do that. We're going to keep it because it was in the spirit of having fun. Our label, if you've ever been to a Trader Joe's, the whole place is, they market fun as much as they market food. The employees have Hawaiian shirts on. The decorations there are very unique, as like it's a trading post from a long time ago when there were sailing ships bringing things here and there. And so thank goodness for Trader Joe's. They actually decided on this, we're actually not going to bend. You have to understand that some things are just fun and they should be taken in the spirit of fun, and not everything is an existential threat to social justice and our way of life. And so good for them.
But do they sell Kindergarten Cop in their DVD section?
Oh boy.
We're going to have to send someone
That's a trick
down.
question. They don't have
Andy,
a DVD section.
Go down to the Trader Joe's, see if they're selling Kindergarten Cop or any Paw Patrol stuff. So we'll get to the bottom of this. Kindergarten Cop Gate.
Yeah, but if that author was upset about Kindergarten Cop, who's going to tell her about 21 Jump Street? I mean, the cops in that school are a little bit more active than even Arnold Schwarzenegger is.
But you are right. This her profile on Twitter is now blocked, or locked, I should say. She's got 500 followers. Why are we talking about this? It's just so preposterous. It's almost like a self-fulfilling prophecy at this point. It's so ludicrous that we have to talk about it, which is giving it more attention than what it would have gotten naturally.
Good. Maybe these people will think twice the next time they try to do something stupid like this. By the way, if Kindergarten Cop is offensive,
RoboCop, you're next.
Okay, so actually that's a good point. Isn't it? But by this logic, every cop movie, everyone is out of the question. We can't have it. Every single cop movie, unless the cops are the villains, every cop movie has to be eliminated, right?
Well, if the cops are the villains, then who are the heroes? The criminals? Is that where we're at now? Mm-hmm. Criminals are the heroes of the cops.
That's the only logical way of applying this rule, though, because if Kindergarten Cop is bad because it's just cops around in schools, like have you guys seen Lethal Weapon? Have you guys seen like the Lethal Weapon movies? Well, I can't remember which one it was, but I watched Lethal Weapon, 2 or 3 or something the other day. And there's a scene where they shoot and kill a black kid, right? Because he's shooting at them. Doesn't matter if he's shooting at them. The point is a white cop, or no, it's a black cop, but it's a cop, shoots and kills a black kid. So there's no way we can allow that movie, right? Or like any movie where they're glorifying police at all, you would think would have to be completely eliminated. I just don't see how we can have that.
Well, even going towards like the founding fathers, right? Like one of my favorite movies is Mel Gibson's The Patriot. Mm-hmm. When are we ever going to see a movie like that made again?
Never.
Are we ever going to see a movie like glorifying like the concept of the founding fathers or just like the Revolutionary War or America? Are we ever going to see that again? Like from Hollywood, obviously.
Nope.
No, I don't think so.
No chance. No, absolutely no chance.
And if they eliminated every television show on the networks that glorified the work of the police, half of primetime television would be test patterns. And the rest of it would be medical shows. I guess doctors are the only heroes you're allowed to have.
Just think about how many times you turn on television and it's like Law and Order or something. It's like constantly. It's just like they're everywhere, somewhere on the planet right now. Law and Order is playing, guaranteed. And so it's like you have to shut all those things off. If Kindergarten Cop is bad, then those are definitely bad. All those are way worse. They're way worse. Yeah. So is that really what she's suggesting? That we just eliminate everything and that these people will just, I mean, I don't know. Oregon is essentially an insane asylum. It's essentially the whole state needs to be committed. Okay. It's a beautiful place. It's gorgeous. All right. Beautiful. And when I say Oregon, I don't mean the people that live in Eastern Oregon, which is real America. I'm talking about by the coast, Western Oregon, a sane asylum. That's a sane asylum. Like the whole thing, the whole part of Western Oregon, all the way up through Seattle, all of that. It should just be quarantined off and they should all be just mass committed.
Yeah. We could just do like a half a state level of, what was it? Chaz?
There's a petition to make part of Eastern Washington and Oregon part of Idaho.
Boom.
Yeah. They've been trying to do that for a while.
Call it Greater Idaho. Yeah.
Get free potatoes. All right, let's move on. Let's talk about COVID. Let's talk about some COVID. So I do want to talk about this Heritage Foundation report, a comparative analysis of policy approaches to COVID-19 around the world with recommendations for U.S. lawmakers. But before we jump into that, there is a couple of stories. So the narrative going on out there right now about COVID in the United States is that we dumb Americans can't keep our masks on. So because of that, there's another spike of COVID going on, right? So despite the fact that the actual
shoot
cases
this
are
virus. That's how I'm going to take it out.
That's right. The cases are starting to go down, especially in states like California had like a big jump recently. That's going down. New York was the state that initially had that giant spike. We already talked about de Blasio's poster, right? That was de Blasio that made that crazy poster. Anyways,
yeah, it was. No, it wasn't de Blasio. It was Cuomo. Yeah.
Cuomo. So anyways, like a lot of these states are actually like bottoming out when it comes to cases, especially in New York. California definitely on its way down. But that's not stopping increasingly severe restrictions from being put into place. So this is an article from Business Insider. It's titled "The Mayor of LA Threatened to Cut Power and Water to Houses Hosting Parties After YouTube and TikTok Stars Kept Gathering Despite COVID Restrictions." All of these things sound like satire, but no, this is real life.
Good luck making those TikToks without water, kids.
This says Los Angeles
somewhere else.
Yeah. Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti said officials will cut water and power to houses that host parties which are currently banned due to coronavirus pandemic. According to the Daily Beast, Garcetti said, starting on Friday night, the LAPD responds and verifies that a large gathering is occurring at a property, and we see these properties offending time and time again. They will provide notice and initiate the process to request the DWP shut off service within the next 48 hours. So, first of all, 48 hours, they're going to see like a house party going on. They're going to initiate a process that takes 48 hours to turn off the water.
Sounds about right. Sounds about the normal government timeline for doing everything. and shut parties down in a timely fashion.
It's also the average length of a Hollywood party, too, is 48 hours. So,
I guess.
It is Hollywood.
But is it supposed to just be like punishment? Like, you guys had a party a couple of days ago, so no more water.
Right. This is...
Yeah, well, so, I mean, it makes sense. By the time they get there to shut down the party that had already ended, another party will be starting. So there you go. They're always one party behind, but that's okay.
Well, and not only is it totalitarianism, it's incompetent totalitarianism, which is actually a feature of totalitarianism.
Oh yeah, no, that goes hand in hand.
Yeah.
It says the threat. The threat to shut off utilities mirrors one that Garcetti made to businesses in April, when he said that any unessential business that continues to operate in defiance of restrictions could get their water and power shut off. So have we, I feel like I remember talking about this idea of companies like shutting off water to businesses that they don't like as just like a crazy hypothetical, just like 6 months ago. And now it's like reality. This is insane. Like how long before this precedent is used to fight like climate change or something like that?
Not long. And actually, I keep waiting for the residents of these left-leaning states, these deep blue states like California and New York, to finally come to the point where they say, this is my level. I can't take anymore. I've had enough. And I think maybe telling people that we're going to shut off the water and power to your house if you hold a party with more than 10 people 8 feet apart, might be finally that breaking point where these serfs that live in these deep blue states finally basically take up the proverbial torches and pitchforks and say no more. We want our freedom and our liberty back. So maybe this is the point for California.
Nope.
Yeah, right.
All right.
No.
If anything, if that happens, they'll move to Texas and then just ruin that state.
Well,
so,
yeah,
for
sure.
That's next on the agenda.
Was that a slight against Joe Rogan?
No, it wasn't a slight against Joe Rogan, but he's part of the problem too. So yeah.
Like, no, they'll just start calling the cops on their neighbors and just be like, oh, they had a party.
No, what they'll do is they'll violate the law. See, like, this is the thing, because I've spent so much time living in, and you guys have spent lots of time in Illinois, right? You should know this.
I spend as little time as I can there.
But well, I know that, Isaac, but you've been there. You know what it's like. I think that in a lot of these places, what ends up happening is the people just become so used to this kind of thing. They don't necessarily follow the law. All right. Like they don't necessarily follow it, but they're not offended by it either. They're just like, this is the norm. This is the way things are. Like, oh yeah, the government, they do this kind of crap. And then you just, you ignore them, whatever. And then life goes on. And that's how these things operate. Like I've spent a lot of time in Rhode Island, which is like one of the most liberal states on the planet. And when you're in Rhode Island, that's the attitude everybody has. Most of the people in Rhode Island are not nearly as liberal as the people they vote into office, but they just think that's how government is supposed to be. That they're supposed to be this like overbearing nanny state, that you're supposed to just ignore them when you don't like them, and that you're not going to vote Republican because they're a bunch of racists. So you're just going to keep voting in the Democrats, and they'll keep annoying you with stupid rules, and you'll just keep ignoring their stupid rules, and on the cycle goes. That's what people believe. Like, that's how it works. So in California, that's what they believe too. It's no different. They'll just
you can't ignore the state when they turn off your power and water. And then who do you call to say, oh, I'm sorry. Can you please turn it back on? We'll let you know. Maybe you must promise.
But that's the thing. They won't. They'll be so dysfunctional at it, and that it won't be a widespread problem. It'll be one of these things where it only happen to a handful of people, and they'll be outraged, and then the government will stop doing it, and life will go on. Like, yeah, if they were mass shutting off people's power and water, then yeah, absolutely. But they're too smart to do that. They're not going to just shut off everyone's water. They'll just target specific individual things to make to really make an example out of them or whatever. And they'll be outraged. It'll be all over Fox News. And
let me pose this hypothetical to you, because, we've seen with social media and then like shutting down, taking all those videos off of like the frontline doctors talking about hydroxychloroquine and all of that. They were removed, right? Facebook removed them. Like before I could even watch it, they removed it. It was that quick. So let's say Joe Rogan, he is in the LA area. He's in California. He's got the biggest podcast out there. Let's say he has one of these doctors on. Okay. Like I guess they could try to take down his video, but he's pretty influential enough where I think his message will get out. Will they shut his water off? Will they shut off his electricity because he's getting this, controversial viewpoints out there? Like, are we getting to the point where that is like okay by the government?
It's thought policing via like basic necessities.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think that this is going to make a difference, because California already shut off the power to like 3 million people last fall for like 4 days at a time. And people didn't leave in droves. Like, people are leaving, but they're not leaving enough.
That's because of the forest fire stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, it's going to keep happening. That's the thing. Like, California is such a mess, and like, people are just going to deal with it. They're going to think that not only will they deal with it, they will think it is a badge of honor that they're dealing with it. Right. I mean, like, look at the way that masks have been politicized, and like, I wear one when I go out. I think if you want the, economy to be strong, maybe just be like, okay, maybe these work and it's worth the thing. But like, the people who like wear masks and want to force it down everybody's throat, like, they actively think that they're like saving the world. It's the same people that recycle and think they're saving the world. Even if they sat down and thought about it, they'd realize how like inconsequential their lives truly are. And they're just like deal with the abyss of emptiness that we all should have to like wrestle with.
Wow, very nice.
None of us matter.
Angle that you're taking there.
Well, I mean, the theme of this podcast, and when we talk about COVID over the last several weeks, has been how shocked, at least I am, of how compliant America has become to the usurpation of their liberties.
Well, and, you know what?
And accepting any punishment the government wants to mete out to you, including shutting off your power and water because you threw a party. I mean, it's shocking to me as an American that so many people are just complying. I mean, look at New York City. Like, just real quick, they announced the other day that all visitors to New York City must fill out a form. I'd love to see the form. I can't wait. Maybe soon we'll get that form and can share it with our watchers, our viewers and listeners. But you have to fill out a form that says where you've been, if you're COVID positive, all sorts of information you have to do, and you have to hand it in. And then probably also have to quarantine yourself and not move around in New York City and presumably New York State. And I just saw yesterday that a clip of one of the apparatchiks of New York State telling the citizens or the subjects of his Royal Highness Andrew Cuomo that they're going to dispatch a bunch of workers, state workers, to Penn Station in New York City, where so many commuters from other states come in. And they're going to be making sure, as they see everybody walking around, that they have their papers ready. They have turned in no time. New York City has turned into freaking East Germany. This is, wait, let me see your papers. And you must give me all this information. This is unbelievable. This is America. This is not a free country anymore when these sorts of things are happening, and the people have no resistance to it whatsoever. It is extremely disappointing as somebody who lives in Illinois to see so many people complying with these sorts of totalitarian tactics, these rituals that are just the norm in countries where the people are not free and never have been free.
Well, that's the thing. So the compliance thing, right? So I feel like America would give you the people of America would give the benefit of the doubt when it comes to the like a pandemic, right? Like you're telling us we have to lock down for 14 days and all of that to make sure our hospital systems don't get overloaded. That's fine. We'll do that. But then it's like once like 4 months have passed and they're not letting us out of our houses yet, then we start thinking like, screw this. I'm having a 4th of July party, right? And then that's where we're at. And then that's what the government is responding to when they're freaking out and saying that, these dumb Americans aren't doing what they're told. And now we're having a resurgence in cases. But like we've gotten way past that original goal line, which was making sure our hospital systems don't get overloaded. Are New York City's hospital systems overloaded? I don't feel like they have been in 4 months. Yet there's increasingly stringent restrictions on their population. I just don't get it. I don't get it. So yeah, like at first, I'll play by your rules. I'll hang out in my house for 14 days. I'll work from home, all of those things. But once 6 months have passed, yeah, I'm less likely to do that. But that kind of brings us to this Heritage Foundation report. So like I said, a comparative analysis of policy approaches to COVID-19 around the world with recommendations for U.S. lawmakers. So it says, since COVID-19 became a global pandemic in March of 2020, countries around the world have taken various approaches to contain the proliferation of the virus. 3 Heritage Foundation analysts examine the approaches of 10 countries with differing levels of economic freedom. These countries have taken vastly different approaches with varying degrees of success. The research finds that full lockdowns, such as those implemented in the United States and Italy, are not as effective as the more targeted approaches taken in other countries, such as South Korea and Iceland. The authors conclude their analysis with a number of recommendations for lawmakers in the United States. So basically, the report starts off with some basic information about COVID-19, its history, how it spread, et cetera, and then it gets to a point where it's doing a country-by-country breakdown. So one of the first countries that it goes to is Italy. It says that Italy ranks moderately free on the Heritage Freedom Report. It's got the oldest population of any of the countries that are analyzed. 23% of the population is over the age of 65. It compares the reaction. So this is just an example of one of the countries. So it compares the reaction in 2 different regions of Italy. One that tested like everybody, as much people as they could, and one that tested only symptomatic people. And basically, the one region was able to kind of focus in on the people that were actually spreading it, whereas the other one had to kind of do a more generalized lockdown. Goes through South Korea. So South Korea, proximity to China, spurred South Korea to get an early jump on testing. It says as a result, within weeks of the outbreak in China, 4 Korean companies had manufactured tests based on recommendations from the World Health Organization. And Korea was able to issue more than 90 times as many tests on a per capita basis than the United States did during the week of March 8th, 2020. So then it goes through Iceland, Australia, New Zealand, China, Iran, Norway, Sweden, and Germany, and kind of does this analysis. It's really good stuff in there that you should check out if you're particularly interested in this. But then it kind of gets to the main points at the end, right? So this is like their findings. So it says the United States had significant difficulty with testing early on due to excessive regulation preventing it from being able to implement aggressive testing and tracing programs. Thank you, FDA. So that's just the government kind of getting in the way of this. The United States does lead the world in COVID testing. However, on a per capita basis, the United States has given less than half of the number of tests that have been given in Iceland. It says that deaths disproportionately affect elderly and those with comorbidities. Some countries that eschewed lockdown policies and relied on more targeted approaches, such as South Korea and Iceland, have experienced outcomes even better than those that have relied on more severe lockdown approaches, et cetera, et cetera. So then it gets down to policy recommendations. And basically the main two things is like you need to test a lot and you need to focus on at-risk communities instead of these broad one-size-fits-all, everyone stay in your home forever type of things. I mean, this seems like a no-brainer when I'm reading through this. But like the media has really whipped us into the state where it's like you've got two options. One, do nothing and die. Or two, lock down everything and live. It's just like, no, we can see from other countries around the world that, we could do targeted approaches and make sure that we protect people that are at risk while allowing the economy to continue on. So, gentlemen, if you look through any of this stuff, what are your thoughts?
Well, it's interesting because they note that places like New York, New Jersey, and Michigan actually required that nursing homes accept patients that came from the hospital with COVID.
Yeah.
So, like, if I would be very interested to see if you took out some of those numbers from like Michigan and Andrew Cuomo, who apparently can do nothing wrong when it comes to his response to the virus, and like took out the excess deaths that we obviously kept getting because of their bad policy, where we would stack up as a country, because like New York, New Jersey, and Massachusetts account for most of the COVID deaths.
Sure. Oh yeah, no doubt.
Like,
yeah, I know in Illinois, which we had a similar practice here. 55% of the COVID deaths are related to nursing homes and retirement homes.
Oh, same in Minnesota. I mean, we have something closer to like 80, not 80. It's like probably like 75% of all the deaths in Minnesota come from nursing homes because our inept politicians decided that they were going to have nursing homes accept COVID patients. It's like, this is like when you look at the death charts for COVID by age, like it's always 60, 70, 80, 90 plus. And that's like all of it, right? So like if you are going to Amazon Prime the virus to the people who are the most susceptible to it, like how would you think that you would fare? Like that's the dumbest thing you could possibly do. Like just doing anything but that is going to be like yielding superior results. And I think
no. We have to crack down on house parties that have 20-year-olds attending them. That's how we really solve the problem, Isaac.
Well, maybe it's been like these nursing homes that have been having these ragers and like
they're the TikTok. That's what's going on.
We need to shut down the power and the water to the nursing homes.
In LA, all of the TikTok users and YouTube influencers are actually 90 plus years old. So it actually does work out. I didn't know about that.
The latest jitterbug app.
Justin, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I understand the argument initially that you need to shut things down in order to help stop the spread of the virus. But so many of the other things that have happened since then really just don't even make any sense. Like this emphasis on contact tracing, for example, right? This is the big thing that the left wants to do. They want to track down every single person. So if you have someone in your life who has been, who's tested positive for COVID, they want to track every single person down who's had anything to do with that person in order to try to stop the spread of the virus. And then if you've just even come in contact with them, they want to immediately quarantine you, whether you've tested positive or not, because they don't have the ability to test everybody who's come into contact with you. And so they've tried to come up with this elaborate system for doing contact tracing, and they want to hire like thousands and thousands of government workers to engage in this contact tracing. When the reality is, going all the way back, right from the very beginning, testing is the essential part of all of this. If we had just mass tested early on, quickly, then the people who knew that they had the virus would have quarantined themselves. The problem with the virus is not that it's being spread by people who know they have it, but they're just irresponsible people. The problem is that the people who don't know that they have it. That's the whole point, right? So the only way to know that you have it is to have a test and then to get the results back for that test, which is the other part of this equation too, quickly. The problem that we have right now is we're giving out lots of tests, but you're not getting the results back quickly unless you're in a sort of a high priority group, like you're a healthcare professional or you're going in for surgery or something like that. Then you do get your test results quickly, but most people have to wait a week or 2 weeks or something. Well, that does you no good because over that week or 2 weeks, you may have contracted it somewhere else, right? So unless you're quarantining yourself for a week or 2 weeks while you're waiting for the test results, which in that case, just quarantine yourself all the time, then so what's the point of this whole thing? So even the testing that we have now is irrelevant because they're not, in many cases, because they're not getting the results back quickly enough. So the real issue here is the infrastructure of the testing, the fact that they didn't do widespread testing quickly, the fact that once they did roll out widespread testing, they didn't get the results back fast enough because the testing centers are all just overburdened at this point. We don't have enough of that infrastructure built in. I mean, these are the issues that need to be dealt with. It's not shutting down all of these businesses and doing all this other stuff. If they just, instead of wasting all of that time and money and resources and energy closing down all those things, they just invested that in building more test centers, then they could have stopped the spread of the virus and it would have been a lot cheaper than what they did. How many trillions of dollars will end up being wasted as a result of this worldwide by just closing down all of these economies when they could have just built more test centers and trained more people to do that job? And we could have had more widespread testing and this whole thing could have been avoided. And then, not sending old people who have tested positive for COVID into nursing homes where they're going to infect people who are at risk. These are the kinds of things that it was so incompetent. And right from the very beginning, the federal government was totally incompetent in the way that they handled this. And this is not an attack on Donald Trump per se, although he was the head of the federal government at the time. It's just anybody that you put in that position because the federal government is useless and can't do anything effectively. It was going to happen no matter what.
Remember when we covered a couple of stories? I think it was a Reason.com article about different private businesses that wanted to start making these tests, and it was the FDA that was stopping them from doing it. So there's a chart in this report that kind of shows the level of testing per capita, like between all of the different states that are being analyzed in the report. And one of the things is a chart showing like South Korea. South Korea now has a very comparable amount of testing that we have done, but they started off quicker. They started off much quicker. Right. So, and that was probably the biggest change between the two is how much quicker they were able to do it. So that article that we were talking about, the FDA didn't stop those private businesses from getting in the testing game. We could have seen a dramatically different landscape than what we're in right now. But Jim, you haven't talked yet.
Look, this still comes down to what happened in March when this began, or what was happening in late February to mid-March when all this first began. When we got the first case, I think the first recorded case was in Seattle, in Washington state. And it was a person from China who had traveled from China in the Wuhan region. And Donald Trump wanted to shut down all travel from China to try to get a handle on the spread of the virus in the United States, which was inevitable. It was going to happen anyway. This is a global pandemic. The idea that you can stop it from getting into your country is that's fantasy talk. And of course, when he did that, he was called a xenophobe by none other than Joe Biden. The people of the wonderful leaders of New York State, New York City, actually encouraged people to come out for Chinese Lunar New Year and to come down to Chinatown and be in a parade and do all this stuff. And actually, about a month or two, I think it was late April or mid-May, they did a study and they showed that actually most of the cases in the United States that spread came out of New York City. And so they spread the virus from New York City across much of the rest of the country. And so we went on to this policy of course, you always remember, 15 days to stop the spread. And then we all thought, okay, we can hunker down for 2 weeks and then see how things go. And it turned into obviously what we have now. And there is still this mentality that if you just stayed down underground long enough, the virus will pass over you, like a fog, and it'll lift, and then you'll be able to come up and be safe again. That's lunacy. That's not how viruses work. They will spread. And other countries like Sweden and others that did not shut down their entire economies decided, you know what we should do? We should make sure that we protect the vulnerable and get on with our lives, because people are going to get this virus. There's really no way to stop the spread of it in any meaningful way, because it is a virus and these things happen. Even all the precautions you could take in flu season, you're probably still going to get the flu. None of the real protective measures you take, even if you walk around with a mask during flu season, you're probably, if you're exposed to the virus, you're going to get the virus. That's how they work. And so, we still haven't gotten as a country our head out of the mentality that you can just stay underground like Joe Biden long enough and the virus will pass and you will not be infected with it. The idea was to slow the spread so our healthcare services in the United States will be able to handle an expected deluge of patients. And we spent billions of dollars building special field hospitals in cities like Chicago and New York City and Houston and Los Angeles that went unused. The money, Justin, you talk about what we should have spent our money on with more testing and testing centers and all that stuff. Perfect. We wasted hundreds of millions, if not $1 billion or more, on these field hospitals that were not necessary. But we keep changing. We just keep changing what the goals are, and the idea that now we have more cases. Who cares? It's about the death rate. It's about the number of people who die because they got the virus. And half of the people in the United States, half of the deaths of the 200,000 plus that we have now, half of them were in long-term care homes. If we had concentrated in the beginning on protecting the people in long-term care homes, our death, or the number of Americans who would have died from COVID-19 would probably be around 150,000 at most. And that's Monday morning quarterbacking, I guess. But Sweden didn't need to Monday morning quarterback to get their policies correct.
Yeah, no, it's just kind of bizarre. It's refreshing to look at this as like, we can do some stuff that are actually very effective at limiting the spread of this and getting away from the kind of the binary choice of like, we either do nothing or we cut off people's water and electricity if they're having a party of more than 10 people.
Or destroy the economy.
Yeah.
Destroy the American economy. A minus 30% growth rate in the second quarter of this year.
Which was still better than a lot of countries, which is crazy.
But by the way, I agree with a lot of what Jim said. Not everything. I do think that initially, I don't agree that you have to just accept this idea that everybody's going to get infected and that a certain percentage of people are going to die. I don't think that's what happened in South Korea. In South Korea, sure, they did lock it down early. And they
used all
tested
the contract stuff that you were like disparaging earlier, Justin. So how do you reconcile that? Like, did you read the Heritage study?
No, honestly, no, I did not.
Oh, okay. So one of the big things about South Korea was that they had very extensive contact tracing. Like, everybody was required to download this app. If you were you would get a notification if you were in an area where somebody had COVID. You didn't have their name, but basically it was very extensive for the contact tracing. And they've been on top of this because they've been exposed to more viruses in the past because of, I think it was MERS, Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome. So South Korea just had more infrastructure in place to take care of this. They had more testing right away, which is important, but they have very invasive contact tracing over there. And I think that that's actually been part of the reason why it helped. Also, one thing that I'd like to talk about, do you remember when we were talking about this at the beginning and we were talking about how crazy it was that China was boarding people's houses shut?
Yeah.
So when we look back at that and we were talking about the death rate and the number of people that had died from the virus, and then there was that one article going around saying that I think it was a couple 100,000 cell phone plans had been canceled in China. Mm-hmm. In hindsight, do we think because at the time it was China's hiding the death rate? In hindsight, do we think that that's more or less credible?
That's a very good question. I would have to say that it seems like they were hiding the numbers. Come on.
I agree.
Condition.
I agree that everything that's transpired in the United States makes me feel like there was more credibility to that than maybe I was willing to give it at the beginning of all of this. But
yeah, well, again, I'm just kind of alarmed at like people accepting these totalitarian solutions to dealing with this when there's like, real life stuff that you could do right here that is not quite as invasive as what's being suggested here. But when you superimpose that, if you put that in the context of this next article I want to talk about, it starts to make a little bit more sense. So this is a Washington Post article. It is titled, "Trump Views China's Communist Party as a Threat. Young Chinese see it as a ticket to a better future." So I'm starting to read this. I was like, oh, okay. It's an article about China. Like, I'm sure there's going to be some interesting things in here, that could probably be used in our Stopping Socialism project. What I did not expect is for this to be a completely glowing piece about the Chinese Communist Party. So I just want to kind of run through this. So it starts off, says the overwhelming humidity of the Chinese summer was not enough to stifle the ardor of the crowds of 20-somethings honoring Mao Zedong, the founding father of communist China.
Was this in Brooklyn?
This is in China.
Okay.
Some took fairground-style miniature trains, while others ran 3 miles through the heat to reach the giant statue of young Mao, China's equivalent of Mount Rushmore, staring out at the Yangtze River. So, I mean, how magical, first of all, just the writing of this, how magical. I feel like I'm there. I could feel the heat.
Yeah.
I could feel the heat on my back. I could smell the smog-choked atmosphere. I could feel the police batons whacking my knees already. Like, this is just great stuff. It says, even after decades in power, the ruling party has faced potentially existential challenges over the past year, from pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong and an economic slowdown due to the devastating coronavirus, and most recently, once-in-a-generation floods that have wreaked destruction across central China. But far from diminishing its stature at home, as some in the Trump administration appear to believe, the party's response to some of these crises has helped solidify the support of the existing and aspiring members, or at least neutralize some grumbling. So, hard cuts to China rolling in street loads of tanks into Hong Kong. I mean, it's just kind of crazy that they just like, oh yeah, these pro-democracy protests in Hong Kong, that's a crisis that the party just has to deal with. But they dealt with it good. They curtailed some of that grumbling. So it talks about the Trump administration and they're taking aim at the Communist Party, and then it quotes a professor at the Hunan Provisional Branch of the Communist Party School in China. It says this just shows that they fear a stronger Communist Party and a stronger China after we showed our might in the battle against the coronavirus epidemic. So we're about like halfway through this article, and we finally get to a paragraph that's pretty critical of China. So I'm going to read this in length. It runs China as a one-party state with no opposition allowed, and heavily censors the internet, making it difficult to access information that doesn't fit the official narrative. It holds dreary meetings where men sit on stage surrounded by red flags, droning on in communist argot about central economic plans and staying true to the mission. That's the critical paragraph of China here. That old men sit around with red flags, and that the internet's pretty censored. They don't talk about like the literal concentration camps of Muslim Uyghurs or literal slave labor that's going on across the country, or the social credit scores that are force people to act the way that they want them to act, and the extreme political lockdown of like any oppositional thought.
They don't mention
any of that.
There is like net neutrality.
Yeah, right. It's just like, yeah, that's it. Yeah. But in China, the reality is much more complicated. The party may remain bound to many of the strictures first envisioned by Mao and his comrades in the 1920s. And these pronouncements may hint at an underlying alarm about the challenges China faces, but the organization is relevant to many people's lives. Party membership means better education prospects and better jobs, more politically advantageous marriages, and nicer apartments. For many, it is a ticket to a brighter future.
Sign me up.
If you want an important job, or even to work in a university or a social organization, if you're not a party member, you won't be promoted, said a Chinese political scientist. Plus, young people these days are quite nationalistic, so they are choosing to join the party. See, it's all voluntary, folks. The fact that you won't be able to get a job or a nice apartment or seemingly marry the person that you want to, no, that's not them forcing you into joining the party. It's all just voluntary. Everyone wants to join the party. So then it says, after submitting a letter outlining why
wouldn't you want to be there?
Why she or he believes in the party and also acknowledges personal shortcomings, an applicant to the party must go through courses and pass tests, then submit recommendations from 2 party members. Like, this is just absolutely insane. Like, the article is just talking about how great it is to be a party member in China, in China's Communist Party.
Who owns the Washington Post? Quiz time.
Bezos.
Jeff Bezos. Boy, what a surprise that there would be an article basically as if it was written by Walter Duranty about the Soviet Union in 1930, ending up in his newspaper praising the Communist Party and the entire structure and way of life of China. You know, it wouldn't have anything to do with his future business interests with Amazon, I'm sure.
It's extreme. This is an extreme article. I couldn't believe what I was reading.
So in I don't want to say in fairness to them, but
yeah, let's be fair to the Communist China. Go ahead, Justin.
Not to the Communist Party, to the writer at the Washington Post. So, although obviously they left out quite a bit, I will say this, like, if I said to you that young Chinese people are better off joining the Communist Party than not joining the Communist Party, wouldn't you say that that's true?
Yes.
Like, of course they're better off. I mean, so in that sense, it's like, yeah, I mean, sure. But what's the point of the story? I mean, other than to do what you said, right? Which is to paint this sort of magical picture of what it's like to be in the Communist Party in China and to be young and, in love with communism. Other than that, like, what's the point of it? I mean, I agree with that, but it's like, I'm not sure that there's anything in here that's necessarily false either. Well, it's what they don't say, right? That's the problem.
I totally agree. But like, if I were to take all of the same facts that are in here and all the same quotes, the article that I would write is about how, like, the Chinese Communist Party is using all of these things to basically force everybody non-voluntarily into joining the party, because that's the only way that they can succeed in this communist dictatorship.
The reason the story was written, aside from maybe feathering a future nest for Jeff Bezos, is because Donald Trump came out strongly against the Chinese Communist Party. If he didn't say any, like every good American should, and if he didn't do that, this story wouldn't be written. A really interesting story, actually. I was under the assumption that almost everybody had joined the Communist Party, and instead they're treating it like an exclusive club. Obviously, Uyghurs, who they put in concentration camps, can't be in the Communist Party, I wouldn't imagine. But I think a more interesting story, actually, for an American newspaper might be interviewing and talking about the people that refuse to join the Communist Party.
Yes.
Or are rejected from the Communist Party.
Right.
That would be a pretty interesting thing to learn about. Instead, we get this propaganda piece as if written by the Chinese. And actually, this is one of the factors, I think, about American media that we're going to be seeing a lot more about, or should be hearing a lot more about in the future years. It's China has a lot of influence on American media, quite a bit. And I think maybe we can talk about this more we're almost out of time on another show. But I was not shocked in the least to see this tongue bath given by the Washington Post to the Communist Party of China. It completely was unsurprising.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So actually, what Jim just said is that was the most surprising thing that I saw in the article was the membership rolls of the Chinese Communist Party. So the population of China is about 1.3 billion people, 1.3 to 1.4 billion people. Okay. So it's got a billion more people than the United States, more than a billion more people than the United States. You want to guess, Donnie, how many members of the Communist Party do you think there are?
You said there's 80%.
What's
so
that?
Like
I didn't say there was a percent.
Oh, I don't know. I'm gonna go with 500 million.
500 million? It's
Yeah.
92 million.
Oh wow.
92 million. So it's actually, as Jim said, it's more of an exclusive club than it is this thing that everybody has to join, which I thought was really interesting. Why is it first of all, why is the Communist Party, there's only two reasons why people are not joining. Either number one, it's really hard to join. It's really exclusive, right? In which case, that's just super ironic because it's a communist party, right? They're supposed to be like all about equality and everything else. So why is only a tiny fraction of your population joining this party? That's number one. Either that or two, most people don't want to do it. They don't want to join. More than a billion people don't want anything to do with it. In which case, why? Why don't they want to join? So these two questions, I think, are actually very interesting questions. They're either really exclusive and deliberately keeping people out, which is in total contradiction to their ideology, or everybody hates them secretly, but won't say anything, and they don't want to join because that's the only form of protest that they actually have, not joining the party. It's either one of those two things. Nothing else makes any sense at all. Why would you join?
So we're out of time here, but I don't even think you would see a glowing piece about China or a piece about China this glowing from like Jacobin magazine, let alone the Washington Post. Insanity. But yes, we are out of time here, folks. So that was a quick hour. If you like our show, please subscribe, write a review for us on iTunes. It'd be greatly appreciated. You can find us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube, obviously, pretty much everything nowadays. If you'd like, you can follow us on socialist Twitter at In the Tank Pod. If you'd like, you can send us comments, suggestions, questions at our email at inthethankpodcast@gmail.com. Justin, where can the fine people find you?
At Justin T. Haskins, Facebook and Twitter.
And Jim Likely, where can the fine people find you?
It's not a Tuma. It's just my headphones. And it's also at J Lakely on Twitter and Heartland.org.
Isaac Orr, same question.
I'm just impressed with Jim's Arnold impression.
That's right. You'll find him impressed. All right. Thank you all. We will talk to you next week.